Good to have you with us on this Monday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks for starting your week with us. We're going to begin this morning with the ongoing war with Iran, which is now in its fifth week. President Trump told the Financial Times this weekend that he would like to, quote, take the oil in Iran and is considering seizing Karg Island, which is responsible for moving more than 90% of Iran's oil exports.
The president's comments came as oil prices jumped and U.S. stocks slid ahead of Monday's market open. On top of that, Iran said it's ready to respond to a possible U.S. ground invasion. U.S. Central Command is confirming an additional 3,500 troops have arrived in the Middle East. Strikes continued across the region this week, and that includes an attack on Israel from the Iranian-backed Houthi militant group based in Yemen. At the same time, Israel continues to expand its ground campaign in southern Lebanon, battling another Iranian-backed group, Hezbollah. NBC News International correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us now from Doha, Qatar, with more on everything that's going on. Raf, good morning. Bring us up to speed on the war with Iran. What's the latest we're learning about the strikes we've just seen across the region this weekend?
Joe, Savannah, good morning. All across the Middle East, people are holding their breath, waiting to see if President Trump will give the order to put American boots on the ground in Iran. But for now, there is no let-up in strikes going in both directions. The United States and Israel continuing to pound Iran over the weekend. It does not seem to be changing the policy of the Iranian regime, though. The Strait of Hormuz remains blocked. The Iranians showing no signs of backing down, and they continue to lash out against their neighbors here in the Gulf and in Israel. We've seen a number of drone strikes in Kuwait, Oman, other countries, as well as ballistic missile attacks aimed at Israel. But guys, in some ways, the biggest development is the one you mentioned. The Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen have entered the conflict for the first time. They fired several missiles at Israel over the weekend. The reason this is so significant is you will remember that this rebel group really snarled international shipping back in 2024, threatening ships in the Red Sea. And the big concern is if they resume those attacks, you could see oil prices surging again, with the Iranians blocking the Strait of Hormuz and the Houthis threatening transit in the Red Sea. Guys.
Raf, as the U.S. continues to build up its military presence in the Middle East, President Trump says he would like to seize Iran's oil, as we mentioned. Here's what he told reporters on Air Force One yesterday, though.
They're agreeing with us on the plan. I mean, we asked for 15 things, and for the most part, we're going to be asking for a couple of other things. And just to prove that they're serious, they gave us all these boats. When I talked about 4 days ago, a present, I said they gave me a present, but I didn't think I was at liberty to say what it was. What it was 8 plus 2. It's 10 massive boatloads of oil. And today they gave us another present. They gave us 20 boatloads of oil, and that starts being shipped tomorrow. We're having very good meetings, both directly and indirectly, and I think we're getting a lot of very important points.
Raf, how's Iran responding to all of this?
Well, guys, let's just start by saying there's no basis in international law for just taking the oil of another country, even if you are at war with them. From the Iranian perspective, they are not sounding anywhere near as rosy about these negotiations as President Trump is. The Speaker of the Iranian parliament, he's one of the few surviving senior figures in the regime, has been saying this talk from the president about negotiations is really just his way of trying to manage the oil markets, trying to give them some reason for optimism and keep the prices from coming down. This same figure, who is a former Revolutionary Guard commander, is saying that Iran would welcome a U.S. ground invasion because it would give them the opportunity, in his words, for Iranian forces to set American troops on fire. Guys.
Raf, when we talk about global reaction, we know foreign ministers from Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt did meet in Pakistan this weekend to discuss how to end the war. Did anything meaningful come out of those talks?
So, Joe, it's very notable. Foreign ministers from Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt getting together, not in the room, the Iranians or the Americans. There is obviously a limit to how much progress these intermediaries, these want-to-be intermediaries, can make without the main players in the room. There has been a lot of discussion about a potential meeting between the Iranian and American sides, directly or indirectly, in Islamabad, the capital of Pakistan. At this point, there is nothing scheduled. I'll mention we interviewed Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky over the weekend. He did say that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who are the president's point men on these international negotiations, have delayed several meetings that were supposed to be about Russia-Ukraine in order to focus on the war with Iran and the potential for negotiations. Guys.
All right. Raf Sanchez in Doha. Raf, thank you.
On Meet the Press this Sunday, one Republican senator weighed in on whether he supports U.S. boots on the ground in Iran. NBC News Now anchor and Meet the Press moderator Kristen Welker brings us that interview now. Kristen, good morning.
Hello there, Joe and Savannah. This week on Meet the Press, I asked Republican Senator James Lankford if he would support putting U.S. boots on the ground in Iran. The Wall Street Journal announcing they could be preparing some 10,000 troops to be deployed to the region. Would you support the president putting U.S. boots on the ground in Iran, Senator?
Well, that is a different story. We've got to be able to know what the objectives are and what they're actually carrying out. So to be very clear on this, the worst thing that can happen is to be able to have this kind of conflict start and to not end it, to leave it undone. We've got to be able to finish this. Again, almost 5 decades, Iran has been attacking Americans at every single chance that they have at any moment through their allies in the region, through all these terrorist proxies that they have in Iraq, and all the way through Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. They're going to continue to be able to come after us until we make them stop. The focus here is to be able to stop them from attacking us and to make sure it does not restart again.
So you say it is a different story when we're talking about U.S. boots on the ground. Let me ask you bluntly, Senator, do you believe President Trump would need congressional approval if he, in fact, does want to put U.S. boots on the ground in Iran?
If we have a long-standing war that's happening, go back again to what happened in Iraq or in Afghanistan, yes. If this is to protect Americans and to be able to make sure that we're in there for a season and we're stopping and getting out, that's very, very different. So, again, this is all contingent. It's an interesting question to be able to talk about on the political side, but really the focus needs to be on how do we make them stop attacking us. That's the main focus. The president has the authority to be able to prevent someone from attacking us. That is what he's doing right now. If we're going to have a long-standing occupation, that's a very different issue. But I don't think that's even what President Trump is even talking about. We're not trying to be able to go in and to be able to occupy the country or to be able to have a long-standing, long-term war. No one wants to see that. So I'm looking forward to us getting this mission complete and getting out of there.
You can see my full interview and a whole lot more at MeetThePress.com. You can also get more Meet the Press right here on NBC News Now every weekday at 4 p.m.
All right, Kristen Welker, thanks so much for bringing us that. Also on Sunday, Iran's parliament speaker said his country is ready to face possible U.S. troops on the ground as he accused Washington of secretly planning an assault while seeking negotiations to end the war. That is according to 2 state-affiliated outlets. NBC News military analyst Colonel Steve Warren joins us from Washington with more. Colonel, always great to see you. So President Trump was asked about this, about boots on the ground on this flight back to Washington yesterday. Let's listen to what he told reporters.
Are you considering still putting boots on the ground, and would you do that without going to Congress?
I just have lots of alternatives. We have tremendous numbers of ships over there. We don't need them all because of, the power. Look, I would say we're just like we're ahead of schedule on the ballroom. In a much bigger way, we're ahead of schedule with Iran. We're weeks ahead of schedule.
Colonel, what alternatives to boots on the ground is the president talking about here?
So boots on the ground, Savannah, represents sort of land power. Alternatives to that are sea power and air power, and that's really what the president is primarily exercising now. Today, it's primarily air power, right, which much of it launched from the sea, but it's air power. It's aircraft creating pressure on Iran. Sea power, the opportunity to blockade an island, to use our sea-based platforms to open up the straits. There really are a lot of military options at the president's fingertips right now. And of course, he's now got these Marines in place. So he now has all 3 components really ready to go.
As we mentioned, Colonel, President Trump told the Financial Times this weekend he would like to take Iran's oil. He's considering seizing Harg Island. How might the U.S. approach a military operation like that and help us understand just how significant this island is?
Sure. Kharg Island. So 90% of Iran's oil exports go through Kharg Island. I think it's important to note that it's really just a stop in the funnel. So the oil isn't underneath Kharg Island. The oil is in other places, and it goes through Kharg Island to get transited out. So it's important to the Iranians for their hard currency. Keeping in mind it makes up about 10%, I think, of their GDP. Now, that all said, seizing Kharg Island, I think, is something that we have adequate force in position now to do. So, there's a Marine Expeditionary Unit, about 3,000 Marines in place now. A second one is en route. Between those two ground forces, I believe that's enough to seize Kharg Island. Very quickly, though, Joe, there's a difference between seizing and holding, right? When you seize something, you take it and then you can leave. But if you want to hold it, you're going to need more forces to keep them resupplied, to keep them protected, and to keep them going.
Colonel, President Trump has also made reference to seizing Iran's stockpile of nuclear material. Is that something that could be done with the size of the force that we have in the region? And I think we have a lot of questions about what they do and do not have when it comes to nuclear material. How does that factor in?
Savannah, the short answer to your question is no. The forces that we have in place now are not adequate to forcibly seize the uranium. We understand, or we believe, that the uranium remains buried underground in one of the nuclear sites that we struck back in June of 2025. If that's the case, you're really talking about an excavation project, right? Heavy equipment, bulldozers, et cetera, to dig through these destroyed nuclear facilities and find that uranium. So it's a major project, and I don't think that we really have the forces in place today to do that, particularly if the Iranians didn't want us there. So they would be here, they would be doing this excavation project, under enemy fire. It's just not feasible.
Colonel Steve Warren, thank you so much.
Much needed relief could be on the way this week for TSA officers all around the country. They are expected to begin getting back pay as soon as today.
President Trump signed an order on Friday directing the Department of Homeland Security to redirect funding to pay TSA workers. The ongoing DHS shutdown is now in its 45th.
Bush Intercontinental Airport in Houston with the latest. Priscilla, good morning. So we know DHS has about 500 TSA workers have quit their jobs since the start of the partial government shutdown, so they're not coming back. With that in mind, what is the situation like on the ground? What are we seeing in terms of the long waits at the airports this Monday morning?
Yeah, Joe, it appears that a lot of those other officers, though, who are still on the job have come back. Here at Bush Intercontinental, we have under an hour wait right now during this morning rush. So there is still a line, there is still a wait, but it is a far cry from those hours-long waits that we have been seeing over the past week here at Bush. And we are seeing still some of those long lines in other places, though. You look at in Baltimore, where there was a up to 4-hour wait on Sunday. At LaGuardia this weekend, there were lines that were extending out onto the curb. And we also saw some of that in Philadelphia with those very long lines, as there was a limited amount of checkpoints. So there is still some chaos and some things going on as these airports are trying to get back up and fully operational. But certainly some travelers breathing a sigh of relief to come and find a 1-hour line as opposed to a 4-hour line, as those TSA workers wait to see those paychecks hit their bank accounts today or tomorrow. Joe, Savannah.
So, Priscilla, we mentioned how many agents have quit. A top TSA official testified before Congress last week, says it takes about 4 to 6 months to train new officers. Then we've also seen the presence of ICE agents at airports across the country over the past week. So just given the number of TSA workers that have quit since the beginning of all this, what do we think happens with ICE? Do they stick around at airports once this is all over? Have they made a difference in helping kind of lighten the load for TSA workers?
Yeah, I mean, certainly for the travelers, they say that these DHS agents who have been on the ground here have been helpful in just directing traffic and coordinating. And we have seen more of them on the ground still here today, with Border Czar Tom Homan saying that they are going to stay in place until these operations get fully back to normal. Take a listen to what he had to say about that.
Look, we're going to continue an ICE presence there until the airports feel like they're in 100%, in a posture where they can do normal operations. If less TS agents come back, that means we'll keep more ICE agents there.
And And just to put it into context, in the past 6 months, TSA officers have worked more than 90 days without a paycheck through 3 different government shutdowns. And so when we look at the number of people that are quitting, it's because of that lack of stability in getting that paycheck and being able to make ends meet. And it does take 4 to 6 months to train a new officer. So it's not like they can just be, new officers can be here at work right away. And so to sort of fill that gap, we're going to see the continued presence of those DHS and ICE officers as folks work to get things back on track at the airports across the country. Savannah, Joe?
Yeah, most definitely not a light switch there when it comes to getting everything back on track. Priscilla, thank you so much. In Washington, a deal to end the DHS shutdown is nowhere in sight. Lawmakers in both chambers left town Friday amid that impasse over competing plans. House Republicans rejected a deal that unanimously passed the Senate. That would have funded most of DHS except for ICE and Border Patrol.
Instead, the House approved their own short-term spending bill to fund the entire agency. Well, with that bill facing steep odds in the Senate, Republican leaders are now tasked with brokering a new compromise as party members continue to point fingers at one another. NBC News political reporter Megan Leibowitz joins us with the latest here. Megan, good morning. So we've got this stalemate between the House and the Senate, and it sounds like Republicans really aren't even agreeing completely among themselves on how to move forward. Walk us through these recent votes and where you think things go from here.
Yeah, that's right. So we are in day 45 of this partial government shutdown, making it the longest partial government shutdown in the country's history. Now, to walk you through some of these recent votes that we saw late last week, the Senate first passed a bill that would have funded all of the department except for immigration and deportation operations. That bill had passed with unanimous consent, meaning that Republicans had signed on to it as well. It hit a roadblock, though, when it went to the House. That's because House Speaker Mike Johnson rejected it, instead opting for House Republicans to vote, and they passed a bill that would have funded the entirety of the Department of Homeland Security on a short-term basis. That bill, though, does not seem to have any sort of path forward in the Senate, where it would need some Democratic support in order to get past that 60-vote filibuster threshold. And so right now we're really at an impasse. There's really no signs that we're any closer to this getting resolved. And as you mentioned, lawmakers are now on recess. They can always be called back if the sides seem to be getting closer to any kind of deal for lawmakers to get to some kind of vote. But we don't really have any indication that we're getting closer to that. A source had told NBC as well that Senate Majority Leader John Thune had told Senate Republicans that he was in touch with Democrats to see if there was any kind of bill that they would support passing in order to end this impasse. A spokesperson for Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, though, had responded to this. Take a look at what he had to say. He said that Leader Schumer made clear that Democrats would not accept anything less than was passed unanimously by the Senate. Republicans shouldn't look to Senate Democrats to fix their own internal caucus problems. And Joe and Savannah, a reminder as well that as this continues, federal workers at most agencies across DHS are still going without a paycheck right now.
You know, Megan, when these lawmakers got home, they might have seen any one of these thousands of No Kings protests that took place in cities around the country Saturday. Tell us more about that and what the turnout was like.
Yeah, organizers had planned more than 3,000 events that took place across the country, with some actually taking place around the world as well. Now, in advance of these protests, organizers had said that they were expecting millions of people to turn out, and there was certainly a high turnout at cities across the country. Now, this comes as critics of the administration are protesting anything from the administration's handling of the war in Iran to rising prices to things like the administration's handling of the Jeffrey Epstein case and, of course, immigration and deportation operations. So the flagship rally took place in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, Minneapolis being, of course, where federal agents earlier this year had shot and killed Alex Preddy and Renee Good, sparking more backlash to the administration's deportation operations, and was one of the reasons as well why Democrats had urged there to be immigration and deportation reforms in order to fund the entirety of the department. So at that flagship rally, we heard from Minnesota Governor Tim Walz and even Bruce Springsteen as well, who was there. Take a listen to what they had to say.
When the wannabe dictator in the White House sent his untrained, aggressive thugs to do damage to Minnesota, it was you, Minnesota, who stood up for your neighbors. It was Minnesota who said, not on our watch.
They picked the wrong city. Your strength and your commitment told us that this is still America.
Now, this isn't the first time that Springsteen has spoken out against the Trump administration. He's consistently been a staunch critic of the administration. He performed at the rally as well. And Joe and Savannah, this was the third No Kings rally in less than a year, with the first one taking place in June of last year, Joe and Savannah.
Megan, before we let you go, I do want to ask you another piece of DHS news. The department says Corey Lewandowski is no longer working for them. He was a top advisor to former DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. What do we know about the circumstances here?
Yeah, so a spokesperson telling reporters that Lewandowski is no longer employed, is no longer at the Department of Homeland Security. As you mentioned, he was a top advisor to now former Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, and his future at the department, or whether he had a future at the department, had been unclear after President Trump had fired Noem and replaced her with now Secretary Markwayne Mullin. Now, Lewandowski as well had been facing criticism and controversy too. So Senate Democrats last week had launched launched an inquiry into Lewandowski last week over allegations that he sought personal payments from contractors, which he had denied. Now, Lewandowski and Noem had also faced allegations that they had been having an affair, and they had denied that as well, Joe and Savannah.
All right, Megan, thank you so much.
Golf icon Tiger Woods is facing new legal questions after another high-profile car crash. Woods was charged with driving under the influence after he was involved in a rollover crash on Friday afternoon in Florida. Authorities say Woods was driving at a high rate of speed when he clipped a truck's trailer and flipped his vehicle. No one was injured in the crash. Officials said Woods did pass a breathalyzer test but refused to give a urine sample that would have tested for drugs. This is the second time he has been arrested under suspicion of a DUI in Florida. Woods was taken into custody but posted bond later that day. Comes just days after the 50-year-old was back on the course competing again after his 7th back surgery. Woods has not responded to requests for comment from NBC News.
All right, let's now get a check on your morning news now weather. We have meteorologist Andrea Romero.
Yeah, she's got your forecast on this Monday morning. Andrea, good morning.
Good morning, Joe and Savannah. It's looking like a busy weather week as we track some changes across the country. First, we have this front that's going to be bringing some strong wind gusts to the high plains today, and it's also bringing some spotty showers to the northeast and also parts of the northern Rockies. However, we are expecting the threat of some severe weather as the system continues to move towards the Midwest. Strong to severe storms will be targeting parts of the Great Lake region tomorrow, and some of that severe weather threat might extend into the northeast, the interior northeast, possibly into Wednesday. We have the marginal risk of some strong storms even down south into the southern plains. So looking at that severe threat into late tonight, we're talking about damaging hail, possibly up to 2-inch possible diameter hailstones. We also have wind gusts up to 60 miles per hour and the low threat of some tornadoes that can develop, and that risk will extend into tomorrow. And we're looking at the possibility of that risk into parts of Pennsylvania and even the interior parts of New York State. As far as rainfall forecast, there is a slight chance of some flash flooding that can develop all the way possibly from Illinois into Vermont due to that heavy rainfall. 2 to 3 inches rainfall is possible along that area. So we're looking at that severe weather, and obviously we have that record warm temperature we've seen in March. We're going to start seeing a little shift, some cooling down a little bit, but it's April this week.
Right. The year is flying by.
Isn't it incredible, right?
Thank you.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.